It is just a huge, huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing the legend of endodontics in my lifetime, Dr. William Ben Johnson Dds. He's the founder of Dentsply. It was actually called Tulsa Dental Products in the beginning. Now it's called Dentsply Sirona Tulsa Endodontic Products. He's an inventor, an entrepreneur, an educator, a philanthropist, and one hell of a businessman. He developed Thermafil and then established Tulsa Dental Products, beginning with the modernization of endodontic treatment. He has received several awards, such as the 2004 President's Award from the American Association of Endodontists and the 2000 Louis Grossman Award from the French Endodontic Society. He is a member of the Oklahoma Dental Association, American Association of Endodontists, and the International College of Dentists, among others. Most recently, Johnson has directed his efforts towards designing instruments for improved cleaning and shaping of the root canal system. He received his DDS degree and endodontic certificate from Baylor University of Dental School. And even in your bio, that's the first thing I'd like to historically clear up, because I was under the impression when I got out of school in '87 that until they started the endodontic specialty, general dentists who just wanted to be only do root canals just said practice limited to endodontics, and that was all it takes. Then later they started, no, we need to do a program, and it started out a year long, then it turned into a 2-year long, then a 3-year long, and I thought that was your situation. I didn't even know till Cliff Ruddle told me that you actually went to an endo program. I don't think John McSpadden did he?
No, John McSpadden didn't. He's, as you said, a general practitioner who limited his practice to endodontics. And actually, that criteria with graduate programs started was back in the probably early 60s, maybe late 50s. There's some dispute as to which school was the first one to have a graduate program, whether that was Ohio State or Illinois, but they actually started graduate programs that long ago. And after the AAE became after endodontics became a recognized specialty by the ADA, and I think that was in '64, the fellows who had their practices limited to endodontists, if they wanted to become an endodontist, had until 1969 to take the American board examination and be recognized as an endodontist. After that, to call yourself an endodontist, you had to attend a graduate program, and those vary from 1.5 years to basically 3 years, depending on what school you go to. And a few states, Oklahoma being one of them, actually had what they called a specialty law. Once you wanted to practice endodontics, you had to take their state examination for that. I think there were only about 5 or 6 states that had that kind of law, but all you could do was endo. And actually, when I started practicing in Tulsa in 1973, because I was an endodontist, they wouldn't let me do the permanent restoration, or they wouldn't even let me put a post in a root canal. They said that was the purview of a general practitioner. So when the general dentist referred a patient to me, it was basically for the root canal, and I put Cavit back in it and sent it back to them. But a couple of years ago, Oklahoma got rid of the specialty law. And I don't know about the other states. I haven't kept up with them. But it was interesting. It was a good thing, because from the standpoint of the patient, if they were referred to an endodontist or oral surgeon or whatever, they knew that they truly had the training. And it was a good thing for the general practitioner, because he knew he'd be getting the patient back for the restoration. So it worked well.
You know, you're never supposed to talk about religion, sex, politics, or violence. So let's start with all 4 of them at the same time. You know, just because you don't agree with something doesn't mean you can't intellectually think about it and discover it. And there's a lot of economists like Milton Friedman who said these state boards is what made America and governments in the 20 richest countries so healthcare so expensive. So that eventually the people couldn't afford it and needed the government to help them buy it. And Milton Friedman said, like in America, if there was, about 1900, they set up all the state medical boards across the country. So each one of these government state boards became the judge, the jury, the executioner, and they shut down 90% of the medical and dental schools in that time period. And they licensed who could be a school. When you got out, they licensed who could be a dentist. They set all these rules, and that is what made it so expensive. So the government made it so expensive. Now the people are going back to the government saying, "Will you help us and do some type of government socialized health care?" And like I see in Arizona, I mean, if the poor people in Guadalupe, where there's like 25,000 Guadalupe Indians and people born in Mexico that don't have a citizenship, if they allowed Mexican dentists to come up and practice in Guadalupe, they would all have low-cost dentistry. But the reason they can't afford dentistry is because the state government made it illegal, and so then they go and they need help with Medicaid and Medicare, all this stuff like that. How do you rationalize, or how should the next generation of people? And I know your wife, and a fantastic endodontist from Russia, so you guys have been around the world. You and I have lectured all around the world. How is the next generation of replacements, the dentists just graduating, how are they supposed to wrap around their mind that the only reason they make $175,000 is because the government has strangled the competition? I mean, business is supply and demand, and the government has so regulated the supply that sure, the dentists all make a lot of money, but that's why healthcare is so expensive. And I think the next generation is going to go to the government and say, you pay the bill. It's too expensive for me. And I'm sitting there saying, gosh, they're the ones that broke it in the first place. I mean, it's hard for me to grab my mind that the government is the solution, because all I've seen is the government is always the problem. So I know that's a lot to throw at you this early in the morning, and I'm kind of scared to ask you because you got 8 rifles behind you. I'm afraid you might just pull one off the wall and shoot me right between the eyes.
Well, we're socially distanced, so I don't think my shotguns would carry that far. But boy, you opened up a can of worms there. You basically gave a dissertation, so I'm going to give a dissertation, maybe a little bit different perspective since I lived through it. But when I went through Baylor, I graduated in '69. It was a private university and was extremely expensive. I mean, we're talking like $40,000 a semester. So Baylor was one of the more expensive dental schools. And when I graduated, I had a pretty significant debt I had to pay back over, 10 or 15 years. So I was facing that. And then when I became an endodontist and I was practicing here in Tulsa in '73, I think is when I started practice, the dental schools, all of the dental schools in the U.S., if memory serves me correctly, accepted government subsidies to increase their enrollment. And all the schools accepted that money except for Oregon. Oregon was the only one who didn't do that. They did not increase their enrollment, and some of the schools went so far as to increasing their enrollment and decreasing the time in school. Like Baylor went from 4 years to 3 years, there were, I think, 92 students in my class in '69, and they went up to 150 or 175 students and decreased the amount of time they were in school. So, and they were doing this because, quote unquote, there was going to be a population boom. Well, I am the population boom, so that was already receding. They were basing their criteria on antiquated statistics. I mean, they were already 30 years behind the curve. And then they started producing so many students in the late 70s and early 80s. That's when the crunch for dentists really happened. I mean, when I came to Tulsa in 73, I was the first graduate endodontist, graduate trained endodontist in Tulsa. And the banks, when I went down to talk to a bank, you tell us what you need, we'll give you 110% loan. Your first payment's not in 6 months. And I mean, a student now going in with a degree to get a loan, you better have 50% of the money just to talk to them. So it's a totally different thing now. And it's because we turned out, in my mind, too many dentists. Now, your dissertation, you were talking from the standpoint of the patients. Do I like having to pay a licensing fee from an x-ray machine? No, I don't like that. Do they ever come in and adjust my x-ray machine? No, they never did. So I think that's a bunch of baloney as far as I'm concerned. I think having to hire a registered and trained dental assistant is, which that actually occurred in Oklahoma during the 90s, late 90s. Before that, what they train dental assistants to do to help a general dentist doesn't help me at all, because all I did was endodontics, and they got very little training in that. My best dental assistants through the years were waitresses that knew how to take care of the customer who came in, were prompt, were courteous. I mean, I'd go out and I'd eat out a lot, and like I said, some of my best assistants came from that background. Of course, they got grandfathered in. You had to give them a radiology course so they could take X-rays and things like that. But I don't like some of the license that goes on. But on the other hand, some of it is pretty good. We went through in the 90s case where a denture laboratory all of a sudden started advertising dentures for $150. This is a laboratory guy who's had no dental training other than just making dentures. And the state board stepped in and tried to stop him from doing that. And he filed a federal lawsuit that making dentures was his occupation. And all he got from the dentist anyway was a set of impressions, and he could do that. And he won that federal case, which I thought was pretty bad. I really think.
Do you remember that? Do you remember that case or year?
Training.
Do you have anything on that case that I could Google? What would you Google? Denturist sues.
It was denturist, and it was in Oklahoma, and if memory serves me correct, that was in the mid to late 90s. Could have been the early 90s, but he won in federal court, and there were other similar cases either in Texas or Oklahoma where the state board removed the license of a dentist for doing inappropriate or inadequate care of a patient, and they went to federal court and got their licenses back. So it's a mixed bag of bureaucracy, good
well,
and
let's
bad.
see how good state of Oklahoma. Yeah, I already found it. That is an amazing history. But I just want to, my job on these podcasts is, I think the only value of knowledge, or the most weighted value of knowledge, is what we leave behind to the people who replace us. I mean, we're a million-year-old species, 100 billion have come and gone, and, I just like to capture all these succinct points so that the kids that just walked out of dental kindergarten school can see the future. But I just want to say that, and one last thing, and we'll get off that, but when people talk about Karl Marx and communism and all that, I just want to remind you that Karl Marx was an economist, and his theory was never, ever attempted or tried. Stalin took it over, and it was just it is what it is. And the same for the opposite of Russia or communism is the United States, capitalism. We have never had capitalism in the United States. It has been a completely managed between the richest people and the biggest powers of government have been managing this. I mean, why do you think at least 3 U.S. presidents have done huge atrocities with Indonesia? Is because that was the 4th largest country. It was China, India, U.S., and Indonesia. And your government here in America was afraid that Indonesia would have a democracy. I mean, that scared the hell out of them. And you're just like, what? Where do these guys come from? I want to personally thank you, Ben. You bought the oldest root canal video filmed in 1970 by M.L. Ryan, M.D., DDS, and you gave it to my buddy Brad Gettleman, who I went to dental school with, and all 4 years he was G. Gettleman, F. Ferran, just the greatest endodontist I've ever personally seen. I mean, he's just so intense and loves you to death. And you gave him that video, and he gave it to me to post on Dental Town, and I post on YouTube. Hell, it has 6,000 views on just YouTube. And what's amazing for this is the principles of endo hadn't even changed. I mean, this whole video is finding all the canals and getting them all cleaned.
Right.
And 100 years later, everybody wants to think about everything except that. I remember when you came out with Thermafil, the biggest pushback I saw on that was so many people were afraid that the dentists weren't going to take the time to clean and shape all the canals, because with Thermafil, man, you could just you could file it out to only a 25, and you could get a gutta percha cone Thermafil all the way to the apex. But it kind of looks like when you watch that video, Ben, that nothing's really changed in the principles of endo in over a century.
Well, a principle really shouldn't change. Techniques to fulfill those principles do change somewhat, although you are correct up until, well, let's talk about that video. That was actually a film that Jake Friedland, who practiced in North Carolina, he's passed away a couple of decades ago, but Jake Friedland got that film from Edwin Van Vele. And Edwin Van Vele was actually president of the AAE in the late 50s or early 60s, I believe. His father practiced with M.L. Ryan. And M.L. Ryan, if you're from New York, they say that he's the one that coined the term endodontics. If you're from the Southeast, they say Harry Johnston in Atlanta coined the term endodontics. But one of those two guys is responsible for coining the term endodontics. But if you look in there, the number 3 rubber dam clamp hasn't changed. It was there, and that was 1917, not, I think you said 1970, or else my hearing aids are playing a...
1917.
1917, yes. And you notice the contrangle hadn't changed at all in that time frame, and he was using a rubber dam. And, well, he did spend 3 or 4 visits doing the root canal, but keep in mind, antibiotics didn't come out until World War II. So they irrigated with a bleach solution, although in the video it had a chemical name versus calling it bleach or whatnot. And they used that on wounds during World War I. Instead of suturing up a really bad wound, they would tie off the bleeders and leave it open and come by twice a day and pour bleach across it, sodium hypochlorite, to dissolve away the necrotic tissue, because they knew if they sutured it up, that patient would get gangrene. And I know this because an old patient I had early in the 70s, when he came in and I was doing a root canal on him, he said, "My God, that's sodium hypochlorite." And I looked at him and I said, "How do you know what that is?" He said, "I was a surgeon." And he said, "During World War One, this is what we used." He said, "I can't stand the smell of that." But because he used it so often. But it's kind of interesting. But like you say, I mean, he spent a great deal of time cleaning the root canal systems. If you noticed in the film, the canals were not enlarged dramatically because actually endodontic files, the patent for the K file, and by the way, K stands for Kerr. They're the ones who got the patent on the first files. That was in 1919. So that was 2 years after that video was made. They used brooches and what they called apical picks and things like that. And Ryan actually had some kind of oval shaped instruments that he used for cleaning a root canal that he designed himself. So there wasn't a lot of enlargement. There was a lot of cleaning. And I think there has been a change over the last 10 to 12 years with more emphasis on debridement. We didn't have the emphasis on debridement prior to that because, quite honestly, we just were not doing a good job and we didn't know how to do it better. There were a few articles published that gave you the roadmap that we're now traveling on. So, but having said that, I'll go back to an article. It was published in 1965 in October. It was a month after I entered dental school by Seltzer and Bender, where they said debridement is a prerequisite for wound repair anywhere in the human body, exclamation point, pretty much. And without proper debridement, this is what leads to failure. And of course, Thermafil, you mentioned Thermafil. Well, that was my first invention or introduction into the business side of endodontics. And that came about because in the 80s, the mantra was seal the portals of exit and it will heal, because so much emphasis was on three-dimensional obturation, a la Herb Schilder and his disciples. But if you have debris in there and you have debris at the apex, you have debris in lateral canals, that was a false assumption. But we're all kind of carrying around the baggage of what we were taught and what we believe. Unfortunately, some of us don't have an open mind to see when significant changes are about to occur. But the principles are the same. You are correct. The principles are
And
the
that's
same.
another bizarre thing about humans is when they have a problem, especially every country you've read about in history, when they have a problem, they spend all their money on police and trying to, revenge and arrest and kidnap them and put them in a cage, and just instead of taking that same time and money and just trying to study the problem. It's amazing how in every problem they just want to instead of just working the problem. So the rubber dam, I don't know why dentists don't work under a rubber dam. It's so easy. I mean, I just take a rubber dam and I just tacked it into the ceiling above my head, and I've practiced underneath that rubber dam for 32 years. That's a joke, not a very good one, but I tried. So now the first 5 years of my career before you, these hand files, and I did not know the K file was named after Kerr. Thank you for that. Missed my mind. But I had a little blister on the tip of my finger and my thumb because for 5 years I was just doing, this Pee Wee Herman shuffle. And my gosh, when they came out with rotary, at first it was stainless steel. It would go left and right and come back, and that was just amazing. And then it was I'm not going to forget his name. Who's the guy who invented Naitai?
The guy who invented it was something like Bueller or Buckler or something like that with U.S. Naval Laboratory. But the first article with using nickel titanium in endodontics was published, I think, in '87 out of Ohio State University.
Endodontist Hamid D. Walia,
Well, yeah,
1957 to 2018. Known for his invention of Naitai and root canal therapy, who was born in Myanmar. And that's confusing for a lot of us because he was actually born in Yangon, formerly known as Rangoon, and Myanmar, formerly known as Burma. Received his degree from a college, Mahitmya College in India, and then went on to Marquette. But he got the Ralph F. Summer Award in 2005.
yeah.
But my gosh, before that, it was so hard to file and all those files. And then when it became engine driven, first with stainless steel, then Naitai, I mean, it just made it so much faster and efficient. And now some of these files, it's just amazing if you're old, where you'll clean out or shape a canal, and you're just like, my God, 30 years ago, I couldn't have done that in half an hour. And so now it's so fast and it's so good and it's so efficient. Now the complaints have gone clear to the other side that, gosh, Ben, you made your files so fast and so efficient that now they're removing too much tooth structure. It kind of reminds me of, I really like that, in 1896, the Italian economist, Wilfred Pareto, showed that 80% of the land in Italy was owned by 20% of the people, and today that's called the Pareto Principle. Most people call it the 80-20 rule, but I would say that my feel on Dental Town is that probably 20% of the dentists and endodontists, especially the ones on Dental Town following Kadimi, he's made so many thousands of posts, that it's taken out too much tooth structure, that it's weakening the tooth. And I would say at least 20% of 1 in 5 people doing root canals around the world, especially ones listening to Kadimi, are saying they're too aggressive. You did your job great, but you did it too great. What do you say to that? Do you think people are removing too much tooth structure, and the building, the root and the crown will be weaker because we made it, we cleaned out too much dentin in the middle?
Well, you put me on the spot there because I have friends in both camps.
Right, and you're a master of that, because the dentists, there's just so many things you can't talk about without pushing buttons. And I've seen you at dinner before,
I don't mind doing
navigating endodontists with big,
There's a lot of ways to skin a cat, no doubt about it. And you mentioned with Thermafil, you could fill it with a 25. Well, we actually made a 20. So you could use a 20 size file. And if you look at histology, even in the older, more calcified individual, as far as teeth goes, the apical diameter is a 20 in one dimension and a 27 or 28 in another. Is actually elliptical in shape. So that's what Mother Nature gave you. Our shaping is really nothing more than convenience form. If you go back to G.V. Black, all those forms that he had: extension for prevention, convenience form, and things of that nature. But shaping of root canal is convenience form. You use the term cleaning and debridement. I don't know that a file does that much. You're enlarging the canal, and there is a camp that say you make it bigger, it's cleaner. But that really hasn't been proven to be a true fact. There are some articles. Endodontic literature is kind of like the Bible. You can find something to support everything. But I do believe I was never, well, that's not true. My last My last two molars I did in graduate school, I did using Herb Schilder's shaping technique and obturation technique, and that was back in 72, about 1972. So to me, that's what I call a hogged out looking root canal. But if you listen to Buchanan after the mid 90s or so, his shapes were becoming more conservative. Other guys, not conservative at all. So there is the camp that believe that this deep shaping and these large preparations make it cleaner and better. I think I'm convinced there's no true evidence to show that. But debridement is very important, and you have to have the canal large enough to allow the fluids to get down in there with ultrasonics and whatnot to activate the fluids to really change. If you're still irrigating with just a syringe and needle sodium hypochlorite, well, you're not actually cleaning the apical third. So it needs activation in some form or another. And unfortunately, some of those products that sell the most actually do the worst job, but that's another issue. I don't know where you led me on this, but I am into the conserving. I'm not a nut about it, but I mean, there's some guys make a little pinpoint occlusal opening. I'm not that category, but I don't believe that you should open the canal any more than is necessary. And if I'm going to put a number on it, I'd say the orifices on a typical mesial root of a lower molar or buccal roots of an upper molar, I would say the orifice should be about no bigger than 0.6 millimeters, 0.65, something like that. And a lot of those, particularly on younger patients, are already bigger than that. But if you're talking about a difficult case, and as an endodontist, I generally only got the difficult cases. I didn't enlarge them any more than that. As a company, did I make orifice openers? Yes. And did I make them larger than that? Yes, because as a manufacturer, you've got to manufacture products for everybody, and there's a wide range of that. But personally, no, I don't believe in opening the root canal to large size, and to me, I rarely took a 30 to the apex. And when I say apex, I'm talking about to my working length, which was not a millimeter short. I tried to go to the terminus, through the terminus a little bit, but not enlarge the terminus.
Some have suggested, like your buddy Eric Herbranson, that so many people listen to, that he always says he wishes you came out with instead of Pro Taper and Wave 1, he calls it the Pro Taper Thin Files or the Wave 1 Mini. Do you, and I know that you've, in the past, you've had files like True Shape and True Anatomy. I love the True Anatomy, where that's a great branding name, True Anatomy. Is that do you think there'll be more of those in the future? Do you see more of those coming, or do you, what are your thoughts on True Shape, True Anatomy, and Eric Herbrandson's Pro Taper Thin Files Wave 1 Minis?
Well, Eric Herbranson and I have been friends for decades, and he rarely says anything that I disagree with. The Pro Taper
in fact, I got to shout out my oldest son, Eric, his birthday today, so something good can happen on 9/11. We're doing this on a 9/11 on a Friday, and my gosh, that's why I named him Eric. I named my son Eric after Eric.
Oh, did you really?
No, but just that's for the show. That's for the Endo program.
Okay. Well, like I said, I very rarely disagree with anything that Eric says, and they're always. The interesting thing about Eric, even when he's up against somebody who's very opposed to what he's saying, he's a gentleman about it. I mean, he remains a gentleman about it and just reiterates his point and challenges their position. So I like him very much. And what he was doing with his conservation of tooth structure stuff was basically what I was doing anyway. But going back to ProTaper, the first two or three, Shaper 1, Shaper 2, those are conservative of tooth structure, which gets you up to about a size 20. Now, Finisher 1, which is a 2508, I've used one in my practice ever. Now, the 3009 taper, to me, Howard, is like a 10-penny nail. I mean, I see no place in that in endodontics. And somebody will say, well, there's large anterior teeth. Well, why are you going to grind it out and make it bigger? I mean, that makes no sense. Just clean what's in there and use the natural anatomy that's given to you. I've never used a 30 ProTaper in my life. And I know that Cliff Ruddle and a lot of the shoulder advocates, they use those. They like the shape. They like the resistance form. They think it makes the canal cleaner, but that's a thought process that's not borne out, as I've said before, by literature. So I do believe that going to smaller preparations will be the wave of the future, but that's because we are now encountering ways that we can better debride the root canal and take the debris out before we obturate it. Those go hand in hand. And when you say what's coming along the lines, True Anatomy, I like that as an eccentric file. That way you can touch more tooth structure with a smaller instrument. There's one that Brasler has out. I can't remember the name of it now, the commercial name, because it just came out in the last few years. That's not a particularly bad file, but that was actually invented back in 2010, 2012. It's taken that long to get into the market. I've actually been working on a two-fluted file, and it's two-fluted because that leaves more debris carrying capacity, yet adequate torque to cleanse the root canal with minor shaping. And I was actually thinking about calling it the CD2 file, CD for complete debridement and conservation of dentin. That's what I refer to it myself. It's not commercially available. I've had prototypes made, but I've had a lot of people over the last 4 or 5 years ask me, why don't I start another dental company? I'm 76 years old. I fought those battles. And when you talk about how many lectures you gave per year, I did that also. And I did it from 1990 to 2000.
I still have several memories of just you. Like one time it was Kansas City. I was leaving the lecture and you were getting out of the cab coming in, and another time in Las Vegas. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's why I love podcasting. I mean, we can sit here right now without shoes on and talk to Dennis and Kathmandu. I want to ask you another question about when you go to these. Yes, and Eric is a gentleman. He's a gentleman and a class act. And one thing I want to point out to the kids also is that, meeting for 32 years of meeting the biggest names in dentistry, it doesn't surprise me that Eric J. Herbranson, BS, DDS, MS, he graduated with a BS in physics in 1964. In my own backyard, I lived on the same dorm floor as Joe Dovkin, the endodontist, and that guy could do almost all of freshman physics in his head. I mean, here he was trying to help everybody in the class, all these other, so, if you don't understand the language of science is math. Like Ben and I are talking the language of scientists, which is English, which before World War II was German. I'm so glad. The best thing that came out of World War II is that I didn't have to learn German. And my gosh, so we're talking English between scientists. Math is a language of science. And then, applied math is physics, and then applied physics, chemistry, then biology, and everything human is in biology. But my gosh, if you the people who understand the base of the pyramid the most, they comprehend the most math, then they know the most physics. I remember when I first met you. Talk about what a class act you are. I was in Phoenix, Arizona. I was a punk kid. I was 87. I called you up in your office and I was asking you these questions, and you said, God, it'd just be so much easier if you just come down here. And I'm like, well, dude, Southwest Airlines, I'll jump on a plane this weekend. And you said, great. And you were so nice. You let me spend the whole day with you. But when I asked about there a file, and we're talking about a round hollow, drilling around it to grab it or something like that. You did all the math just verbally. You were talking about the strength of if it was solid, it'd be easy to snap. But if it was hollow, the forces are going around. And so, know your physics. That's all I'm saying is go back to your physics. I want to ask one more thing about, you were talking about how Eric was a gentleman. And if someone disagrees, he just repeats himself. And he's a physics major. You're not going to sit there, raise your hand and say something to change the laws of physics. It's like, but a lot of dentists and physicians and people complain that a lot of the lecturers were nothing more than sales addonists, and they passed the Sunshine Act. That was, when was that? In August 1st, 2013. So that was 7 years ago. And it was supposed to clean up so that the dentists weren't, or physicians mainly, it was prescription pills is what they were going after. It was the pharmaceuticals, had all these physicians going around lecturing to take my pill for this. Do you think the Sunshine Act worked and there are less sales odontists in the conventions today, and whenever you lecture you have to declare if you have any financial interest or anything like that? Do you think that helped, or do you think that was a waste of time?
Well, I think the act itself was basically a waste of time. I think, this last year was the first year that I could actually say that I have no commercial interest in anything, which that was kind of a relieving factor for me. There was no disclaimer, because it seems like whenever anybody has a disclaimer after his name, people look at him kind of askew, like he has something that, like you said, he's trying to sell something. I like to think that I never did that. I would paint both sides of the picture. My side, I think, was a little rosier, but that was because I was talking about better products. What I don't like is when a clinician gets up and speaks at a large meeting now, you're not supposed to name a product. Well, how could I speak generically about Thermafil? There was not another product like that. How could I speak generically about rotary nickel titanium? There wasn't another product. Quite honestly, I was glad when McSpadden came out with a couple of his, I think Quantec was the first one, came out with Quantec, because now I could say rotary nickel titanium instead of just profile, because there were at least two of them out there. But when you're coming out with something innovative and something new, what I call a disruptor in the profession, you have to refer to it. And stepping across the border to being a general practitioner, listening to a specialist speak, they want to know, what medication are you using? Are you doing it at 2 visits or 1 visit? What instruments are you using? They don't want to hear stainless steel. They don't want to hear nickel titanium. They want to hear what you are using. And stepping back into my shoes as a lecturer, I know that a skilled clinician could do a root canal with different size fish hooks if he wanted to. If he had to, he could do that. So is there really a big difference between one nickel titanium instrument and another? Each one has its attributes. It also has its minuses. So as a clinician, you should know what those attributes are and what the minuses are. So whenever I lectured on the rotary nickel titanium, I generally showed 3 or 4 different instruments, and I showed the true, what they actually did in plastic blocks as far as transportation goes and things of that nature, unwinding, separation. I talked about what causes separation and which ones were the most resistance, but I based it on literature, not on sales material. I mean, one of the things that offended me most in a lecture, I guess nobody can sue me at this point in time, or they can sue me, I guess, but I'll say it anyway because it is true. But this lecturer started talking about the Cybron product. Now, having a senior moment, I can't think of it. It was a real strong one. Anyway, they were talking about, well, the center core is parallel, so the grooves are deeper coming up the shaft, making it more flexible. It was not more flexible. I mean, that's obvious to anybody who touched it. And what he was quoting was right off of one of our patents that we had. That was the profile that was made that way. And I talked to him afterwards. I said, hey, listen, you're wrong about that. Well, that's what it says in this article. And I looked in the article, and that's what it said. And then I looked at the reference for that quote, and it goes back to another article. And I'll read that article, and it references that quote going to the advertising brochure for Cybron. And advertising brochures should never be quoted in a scientific article, much less a scientific presentation. So some of the presentations go overboard, and that bothers me. And at the same time, it bothers me. I kind of have to take responsibility somewhat for that because we instituted what we called it a local opinion leader program back in the early 90s, offering slides and things like that, anybody who wanted to give a program and that sort of thing. But since then, now you have companies who will pay people to give programs and things of that nature. We didn't do that when I owned Tulsa Dental Products. We would pay their expenses, but we didn't pay them to lecture. So I think it's good from the standpoint of a disclaimer at it, this is sponsored by somebody or somebody, some company or whatnot, so that the attending people know that, and then whatever he says, if it's presented in a scientific manner, well, that's fine. You can give him a few pluses. If it comes across as a sales pitch, well, maybe the company paid him a little more and he's making it more like a sales pitch. So as the attendee, I think it's probably good for them. Do I think the Sunshine Act has made any difference? I really don't think it has. It kind of irritates me because I used to go to graduate programs pretty frequently and talk to the graduate students as a practicing endodontist, as a person who started a company. And, I think I'm a wealth of knowledge. And as a consequence of that, when it became lunchtime, we'd take them out for lunch. Now you can't do that. You just can't do that. So I think
but they all become a congressman or a senator, and they're worth about $1 million, and then 20 years later they retire and they're worth $100 million.
Yeah,
And but both sides of the
how did
party. I
they
mean,
do that?
I know, I
How did
know.
they do that?
And the reason I don't talk politics is I'm a registered libertarian, and I see the politics in America is 85% of all the stars are binary stars, and we have a two-party binary star. Picking between one of those two parties is like deciding if you want to die of cancer or heart disease, or get your left molar pulled or your right molar. But enough of that. But hey, my buddy and your buddy Mark Olison, the endodontist in British Columbia, we both agree that the greatest thing you ever did was the 1994 .04 taper, which I still use to this day. I mean, I have a lot of my endodontist friends. Brad Gettleman thinks it's a great file. I mean, was that your magnum opus? I mean, I know you've done so many things from Thermafil on, but would you say that the .04 taper profile is you should take down all those shotguns behind you and just replace them with .04 files? Do you think that was your magnum opus?
Well, I will tell you quite honestly, Howard, of anything that's on the marketplace now, that was the best file. That was the best design file ever introduced. Having said that, I did a .04 strictly off the top of my head. I called the manufacturer and I said, Derek, I want you to make, and that came off of the center core for the patent for Thermafil, because I had to design a carrier that was not a file, because I had a previous published article on coating files with gutta purchase. So the core had to be different than a file. So I made it this U-flute design, so it had no sharp edges. I cut the flutes deeper so it was more flexible. And I called Derek and I said, make this out of nickel titanium and double the taper. What do you want to do that for? I said, I want to try something. And sure enough, in a rotation manner, it cut great. It would not cut in a push-pull motion at all. And the grooves were cut deep. If you overstressed an instrument, it would start unwinding. And when I say start unwinding, Howard, those original files were cut with 19 spirals from the tip to the shank. And I had one in a plastic block where I stressed it, and it came out of the plastic block, unwound 21 spirals in the opposite direction. That is huge resistance to torque and deformation. When Dentsply bought the company in 1996, I believe is when it was sold, first thing they did was decrease the depth of the flutes so it had more torque strength. And so what you buy now in the way of a profile is not a bad file, but it's not as good as the original ones were. That's a long answer to your question. But quite honestly, I don't think of any one thing as being a major point in my life. I've actually spent the last 10 or 15 years working on debridement as opposed to instrumentation. And I'm going to say this, maybe I shouldn't say it, but I'm going to say it. What I should do and shouldn't do has never stopped me from doing it. So if I feel it's right, I generally plug right along. But you have almost all the companies are now owned by major corporations. I mean, Dentsply owns Myfer. They bought Tulsa Dental Products. So you have engineers and accountants dictating what you're going to buy, because they base it on, how much does it cost to make? How much are we going to be able to sell it for? How much profit we make, et cetera, et cetera. And you've got Shine that purchased Brasler 8, 10 years ago. So they own Brasseler. They also bought into Edge Endo, which is the low price guy in the market right now, and we'll finish up that acquisition over the next 5 to 6 years or so, and they'll completely own that. Along with that, the manufacturer for the instruments for Brasseler is FKG in Europe, which is a family-owned company, but Shine has exclusive for marketing in the U.S. So everything is controlled by major corporations. There are some independent manufacturers in other foreign countries. Chinese-made products 8 to 10 years ago were not very good. They're getting better. You've got SS White. SS White is a privately owned company, and I think that's one of the ones that Eric Branson speaks on. I can't remember what their minimally shaped instruments are called, but they are made by SS White. I'm not particularly fond of the design from the standpoint of chip space or debris space that it allows you to maximize, but it's a pretty good instrument. There's several good instruments on the market, and probably what the world needs the least is a new instrument manufacturer in the world. But what the world does need are instruments designed for different skill sets in endodontics. Unfortunately, endodontists as a group don't have a set of instruments that I would classify as low torque instruments for use in highly skilled hands. They're given something that dental students can use, and that's not exactly what endodontists need in an operatory. We talked about it when I was still with Dentsply about designating certain instruments as high torque, high cyclic fatigue resistance, having a little visual code on it. So you as a clinician, you're the best judge of what you could do and what you can't do. You could pick the instruments to fit into your category. I think that's a really good idea, and I think companies should look at that and think about doing that, because there are some minimally different design things that could help clinicians quite a bit. But having said that, I will tell you, major corporations aren't going to do it, because you just replace the sale of this instrument with another instrument, so you have no net new income. So there is no impetus for them to do that. I think probably the biggest mistake I made in my corporate life was selling the company. I wish I hadn't done that, but my investors, they wanted the money. So, and I can't say that I didn't enjoy the money myself, but I was proud of Tulsa Dental Products. I thought we did some really unique things, and something that maybe general practitioners don't use so much is MTA, mineral trioxide aggregate. Great for repairing perforations, great for root end filling materials. And I'll tell you, it's great for pulp caps and pulpotomies. I memean, this is amazing stuff. And that came about as just a conversation with Mahmoud Torbinajad and I said, Mahmoud, what we really need is something like this, and just listed the things that it could do. And he was twisting my arm for a contribution for the Research and Education Foundation. And I said, well, you come up with something like this and I'll give you $500,000. And bless his heart, within 2 years' time, he had it. And what did he do with it? He took it to Dentsply, and Dentsply turned it down because that was competing with one of their calcium hydroxide things that was used for pulp cap. And then he came to me and he said, well, Dentsply turned it down. And I said, well, why didn't you bring it to Tulsa Dental? He said, well, Dentsply's bigger. And I said, well, we'll do it. So we did MTA, and then Dentsply ended up acquiring us. But that was never a big money-making product, but it's a great product. And it's led to other things like bioceramics and BC sealer and things like that, so it was a disruptive product for that.
When you talked about Edge Endo by with Shine, I mean, what is the name? What is the deal with Goodis and Endodontists? I mean, think how many. I mean, Chuck Goodis, founder of Edge Endo, Harold Goodis, Department of Endo. My gosh. Do you think when you're born with the last name Goodis that there's some hidden DNA that maybe they'll find on 23andMe that will do that? I mean, have you ever thought about that? I mean, Chuck and Harold, are they even related? Do you think they're related?
Well, Chuck is not related to Harold, I don't believe, but his uncle George Goodis up in Michigan, they are related. I think uncle and nephew. Harold Goodis, he was out in San Francisco, right?
So he's related to George Goodis?
George Goodis, yeah.
Huh, I did not know that.
Yeah, well, I know that they're related. I don't think Harold is related to them. But Chuck Goodis was actually one of our opinion leaders back during the 90s. And then he started a company that got into a lawsuit with Dentsply, and Chuck won a bunch of money from Dentsply. And then he used that to start Edge Endo. He doesn't like Dentsply very much. I don't like Dentsply very much either, but it's not a personal thing. Not a personal thing. I've been in lawsuits with him also. So I like Chuck. I like what he's doing.
Yeah, he's a great guy. But you're saying Edge Endo sold to Brasler, and then Shine owns Brasler. Is that how it worked, or
Brasler sold? Well, Peter Brasler was the one who owned Brasler, and it's separate from the European company. And over there, their instruments are known as Comet. But Peter Brasler sold, well, it might have been an intermediary purchaser, but he sold to Shine, I'd say 8 to 10 years ago, using cowboy math. And Shine took 3 or 4 years to finish up that acquisition, but that's complete now. Shine.
What year did he sell? What year did Chuck Goodis, endodontist, founder, owner, Edge Endo, sell to Henry Shine?
That'd be about 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
There was a public announcement. They own a significant amount of stock, whether that's 49 or 51, I don't know. But over the next 6 or 7 years, they finish up the acquisition and they'll completely own it. So I'd say there's about 4 or 5 years left in that time frame, and then that will be completely owned by Shine.
Yeah, January 2018. Well, let's are you good on time? I mean, I'm sitting here with the legend of Endo, and we just passed 1 hour, and I'm like, no, I got to keep going. I can't let you go at 1 hour.
No, I've got another 20 minutes. I've got a haircut appointment at 2:00.
Well, a bald guy isn't going to shut up to let some man record his hair and go get a haircut.
I got to get rid of this halo up here. So,
well, back to well, let's see. If I only got 20 minutes, okay. Let's go back to Mark Olson. I mean, he was just at a seminar, and he just couldn't believe how gorgeous the cases your wife's Dr. Eugenia Johnson, her cases were with the gentle wave technology. And we started this show talking about this 100-year-old video showing how important cleaning is. You and your wife both know about this. But the reason I say the .04 table was so great is because, remember, I'm a dentist with an MBA. You're a dentist with an endodontic degree, and if you want more people to buy it, you lower your price. The number one winner in every category, Southwest Airlines, 27% of seat miles, Sears, Soul Price. I mean, what Sam Walton and Soul Price did to distribution is amazing. But when you keep one eye on your patient and one eye on cost, you give 8 billion humans the freedom to afford to keep their teeth. And so this Gentle Wave's coming out. There's no doubt that this thing is like a Mercedes Benz for cleaning and shaping, but come on, dude, that's a lot of money. And but you know, they spent $100,000 on a CBCT, some spent $100,000 on CAD CAM. So my succinct questions to you, to these kids coming out of school with $400,000 of student loans, do I need to buy a $100,000 CBCT to do endo like Ben, and a microscope, and now this new Gentle Wave technology for 75 grand? I mean, how much money do you know, what's the return on investment of that to some kid who just walked out of Midwestern Dental School, $400,000 in debt, loves endo, and wants to do the best endo? Does he need a CBCT for every molar? Does he need Gentle Wave for 75 grand? Does he?
Well,
is that enough? Is that enough questions at one time? Now Ben say, no, I was supposed to leave 20 minutes ago, not in 20 minutes.
Well, okay, maybe I can give you an extra 10. You gave me a lot of questions here. First of all, I want to talk about Sam Walton and Walmart, because when I was in undergraduate school, one of my papers that I had to write, and I guess this was for English class, I can't even remember what class it was, but it was you had to do research and whatnot. And there was another discount store that started here in Tulsa, as a matter of fact. It was called Lou Boyle's. So there was Lou Boyle's, and then there was Walmart, I think, had just started. And my paper was on how the interstate highway system, which was done in the 50s, and keep in mind I was an undergraduate from 62 to 65, so not much later than that, how the interstate highway system and the discount houses would be the death knell of rural America. That was my premise. And I got a C on it. But everything I said has turned out to be true, because here in Oklahoma, you wouldn't be familiar with the names, but you get out western Oklahoma, out west of Oklahoma City, there's a town of Clinton, Oklahoma, that has a Walmart. At Shamrock, Oklahoma, and all these other little towns around there, you drive through them, there's nothing there. But even though the highway, the interstate highway, goes through Shamrock, they put the Walmart in Clinton. So everybody drives 30, 35 miles to get the better prices. And mom and pop stores went to hell in a handbasket. I also started another company called Terminator Spinnerbaits, which was a fishing lure made out of nickel titanium.
Which was bigger than your endo.
Yeah, well, it lowered my cost on nickel titanium, because I bought so much nickel titanium, I could make more profit out of the files by selling the spinnerbaits. And Walmart was one of the big customers for fishing lures. Walmart every year wanted more sizes, more colors, more everything at a lower price. I mean, the beat on you and beat on you and beat on you. Every year, they bought 1/4 ounce and 3/4 ounce. They bought white, they bought chartreuse, and they bought chartreuse and white. No matter how many different sizes and colors I gave them, that's all they have. So if you're a fisherman and you want a 1 ounce size or something like that, you can't get it at Walmart. And consequently, none of the other stores, well, Bass Pro followed them, and basically the same thing. So yes, low price is important in the marketplace. It is very important, but that also means you as a consumer have fewer choices and selections from that. That's the other resultant effect of that. Now, having talked about that,
Gentle Wave.
well,
CBC.
before I get to General Wave,
And CBC.
before we get to General Wave,
Yeah.
let's talk about the economics of it.
Wait, before you go to the economic side, I just want to remind you that I was born in Wichita, Kansas, and my mom had three brothers, and Chick, Mark, Pat, and Mark had a grocery store chain in Edmond, Oklahoma, and then I went to Creighton in North in Nebraska, and then right in East in Missouri for dental school, so I know that whole area. In fact, I don't want to switch to politics again, but my God, everybody in Kansas talking about that. The Supreme Court just ruled that half of Oklahoma is now a Native American Indian reservation. I'm in Arizona, where a quarter of the whole state is an Indian reservation. And you were talking about Walmart going out west, and I was sitting there thinking, wow, what's going to happen out there? I mean, I know this is Endo deal, but just real quick, what do you think of the Supreme Court saying half of Oklahoma is an Indian reservation?
Well, actually, this is the first time I've heard it. I knew that it was coming up there because I'm 1/16 Cherokee, so I don't get any money. I don't get anything. But I mean, historically, you look at it, we treated the Indians very badly, very badly. I got no problem with them coming back and making money on the casinos and things like that. I've got no problem with that.
America was built on two mortal sins. They came here and exterminated the American Indian, and then they brought slavery. But everybody knows that. That's not what we're talking about. But I do think my boy's grandma, I love 23andMe because they were wondering why she was so much darker than the rest. And turned out that her and my boy Eric, who's 31 today, they got that same thing about 1% Indian or something from the days in Kansas from their grandma.
Yeah. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the economics of it. A nickel titanium file from the manufacturing standpoint, and you have to know, I don't have any current information, but back when I started this, to make a nickel titanium file, basically, depending upon the volumes, cost you about 90 cents to $1.25 to make. So you're talking about a 6-pack, it's going to be $7.50 manufacturing cost. How does the corporation justify selling that for $90 a 6-pack? I mean, this is where the economics come from, standpoint of the consumer buying, or dentist buying and whatnot. So personally, it tickled me pink when Chuck came out with Edge Endo, where the price is down to where it was when we first introduced nickel titanium back in the mid-90s, which was a decent profit margin. It was about 50% or so. But major corporations, they want to have a 90% profit margin. And of course, they have a lot of bureaucracy that they have to support with salaries and stuff. But unfortunately, a lot of that money doesn't get plowed back into research and development. Most of the major corporations now in dentistry do it by acquisition. Somebody goes out and spends the money to prove that these products work well, like Tulsa Dental Products. I mean, everybody turned Thermafil down, which is why I started Tulsa Dental Products. And the money I made from Thermafil, I used to go with nickel titanium. And you mentioned Walya. Walya's co-author on that article was Brantley at Ohio State. And that was published in '87. Why did no dental company make nickel titanium files before we did? Because they would be trading, it would cost them more than stainless steel, and they'd be trading stainless steel sales for nickel titanium sales, so there was no incremental sales to it. It just, to me, every time I lectured, somebody said, well, what files do you use? And it quickly became apparent to me, if we had a file system we could sell files. So that's how I switched to nickel titanium. The unfortunate thing for Walia is he never patented that concept, and he'd have made a whole lot more money if he had. But that got us to there. Now, you wanted to talk about Sonendo. Sonendo.
Well, no, I didn't want to start with Sonendo. I'm going to back up to Sonendo. What high cost toys are necessary? I mean, is a CBCT necessary? That's 135. That's twice. You could buy two Sonendos for that, and then a microscope hanging on your ceiling from St. Louis's GC microscopes or the expensive ones out of Germany. Do they need a CBCT, a microscope, and then a gentle wave, or a Sonendo, or same thing?
Well, from the standpoint of an endodontist, I would say yes, you do. From the standpoint of a general practitioner, no, you don't. But if you're thinking of mesial roots of lower molars as having two canals and mesial buccal roots of upper molars having two canals, I can tell you, you got the wrong idea. These are complexes in between those two canals. And just by taking a file in and doing it, you can't do it. Now, with a CBCT, you at least have this indication beforehand and know how to do it. You either got to have a lot of knowledge or you got to have the technology to know what you're facing. So I'll leave that to the individual clinician. If he thinks he can do without it, fine. Now, back in 1990, there was a big discussion, do we really need microscopes? I know of only one endodontist who doesn't have a microscope. So that took 30 years for that technology to penetrate the profession. CBCTs, now there are some CBCTs out there. I saw one about 6 months ago that was in the $55,000 category and was pretty darn good. Got the business card somewhere. I can't remember where it was. Personally, I like the J. Marita one. I think the images are better. I think the quality of the image is better. I made my wife buy one because she said the same thing you did. I don't think I need it. I don't think I need it. Well, after she got it and started using it on her surgery cases so that she knew exactly what she was facing, and then some of the more difficult things she was doing, every patient she sees now, that's what she wants to do. And if a patient doesn't want to pay the extra price and it's a difficult case, she'll do it at no charge just so that she knows what she's facing. So yes, I think those are necessary. Is it necessary to invest $75,000 in gentle wave? Well, there's some other technologies out there that I have personal knowledge come close. I haven't seen anything yet that's better, but that come close. And I will tell you from the standpoint, if you go back and look at an article, I don't remember the author's name, but it was out of Ohio State. And I think it was in 87 or 88, where they used, number one, passive ultrasonics is an oxymoron. Ultrasonics is an energy source and it's not passive. But if you prepared your canal to a size 25 or a 30/04 shape or whatever, you can take this little 15 probe, pre-curve it, and go to the terminus and activate it. And what we typically did in the 80s was activate it for a minute per canal, irrigate, and go ahead and fill. They found that if you activated it 3 minutes per canal, which now on a 3-canal molar, that's getting you up to 9 minutes, 4-canal molar, you're getting to 12 minutes. But the cleaning of that canal was more than doubled. You went from 40% clean to 80 some odd percent clean. And I'm including the isthmuses also, which with just 1 minute, isthmuses weren't clean at all. isthmus is lateral canal, but with 3 minutes, very good cleaning. So without any additional cost, by using passive ultrasonics for 3 minutes per canal, use it for a minute, irrigate, another minute, irrigate, another minute, irrigate. For 3 minutes per canal, you can get into the debridement of the root canal system up into the high 80s, where otherwise, if you're just using needle irrigation, syringe irrigation, or ultrasonics for 1 minute, you're talking 40-45% debridement. So you still got 55% of the crap left in there. And if you're going, you can do that and feel justified you're doing a good job without the additional expense. But what Eugenia is doing and what your friend talked to you about, I've encouraged her just to instrument the upper half to 2/3 of the canal with 1506, maybe a 2004 or 2006, and leave the rest of it uninstrumented and use the gentle wave, which will ultrasonically cleanse, ultrasonically and chemically remove all the debris. This way, she doesn't have to face instrument separation, because instrument separation almost always occurs in the apical third. You don't have that problem. All the tissue is removed, and then you can obturate. Of course, this changes your obturation because you haven't shaped this apical portion. So now you have to use gutta percha points to kind of fill what size is going to do. But Howard, principally, this is a sealer fill, and single cone gutta percha is what you end up with, but you're filling all kinds of anatomy that I never saw in my practice career. And it's made her a wonderful endodontist. And
that begs the question, because we started out, I said I think your magnum opus was the .04 taper, because holy moly, if you ever practice for 5 years with a blister on your finger and thumb, you're blown away. And that just made, even today in 2020, half of general dentists hate molar endo and don't want to do it. And this made it so much easier and so much faster, easier, higher quality, lower cost, smaller, that far more providers access to care. You're talking about the rural areas now. Interstate hurt the rural and all these things like that. It's hard for me growing up Irish Catholic in Wichita, Kansas, where my parents had 7 kids in 3 days, to worry about rich people getting treated by endodontists in rich cities from, Paris to London to Tokyo. I'm always worried about the other 7 billion of the 8 billion people. Do they have access to care? But we also, but the negative on the .04 was it was not minimally invasive. So my question is, obviously, does Gentle Wave, which is made by Son Endo, which is also bought Gary Carr's TDO, do the TDOers, does Gentle Wave solve the minimally invasive, so you can clean that whole thing out without making a large shape? Which we started to show that
yes,
probably 20% of the endodontists following John.
I don't know how many gentle wave systems are out there, 500-600, something like that. Almost all of those clinicians are doing less and less enlarging of the root canal. But I will tell you, Howard, it's impossible to tell an endodontist not to use a file. It's impossible to tell them you don't need files. They're going to pick it up no matter what the heck you say to them. So, but do you need to shape that apical portion? No, you don't, because the gentle wave system does remove that debris. Now, if you were going to use ultrasonics, as I mentioned before, you are going to have to shape it to some degree before you can use the ultrasonics that way. But there's choices out there that can be done. But when you're talking about bringing the cost down and making it accessible, so general practitioners can do molar endo, let's see, I think as Cliff Ruddle says, good is the enemy of excellence. You got to know what you are facing, and you've got to know what is the norm. And the norm for a lower molar, mesial root of a lower molar, is not 2 canals. That is not the norm. That is maybe 10% of what you're facing. So you got to have this knowledge. You've got to know what you have to do in order to get good debridement. Shape it minimally or maximally, whichever way you want to do. But the shaping is really for your obturation convenience form.
And again, I since I have an MBA from ASU, I can see markets. They always segment. If you're trying to target, say you're doing dental marketing and you want to do a bunch of implants. So why are you on Instagram to a bunch of teenagers? I mean, I think the implant market, you want a bunch of old people, and that's direct mail. And but market segment on price. I mean, look at houses. You can have everything from a mansion, a 3-bedroom, a 1-bedroom, an apartment. You can live in a van down by the river. Same with cars. There's market segmentation, but you personally, Ben, you're a wealthy man. If you were going to get a molar root canal, I'll hold your feet to fire. If you were going to get a molar root canal, would you want it done with a minimal shaping, minimally invasive, and gentle wave procedure, or would you go back to your magnum opus, the .04 taper, wave 1 shaping, and routine irrigation? What would Big Ben? Does anybody ever call you Big Ben after the London clock? Are you the Big Ben of endo?
I've been called almost everything. Some of them not so nice. I want to correct one thing you said. You said the .04 taper was not minimally invasive. I will disagree with that because number one, that instrument came down to size 15, 1504. The natural progression of taper in a root canal system is about 03 to 05. So 04, just by picking off the top of my head, is right in there. Yeah, some of them is enlarging a little bit, but an uninstrumented mesial root of a lower molar will look to you like a 2504 taper once it's obturated with paste fill and single cone, because that's what Mother Nature gave you. So that really was minimally invasive. Now, if you used a 35 and a 40 and stuff up, well, now you're getting out of that program. But if Ben Johnson needs a root canal anytime in the near future, it's going to be done with the best that we have to offer at this point in time. And that's going to be shaped about halfway to 2/3 of the way down the canal, minimally. I would say 2006 maximum, 1506 is okay with me. And then it's going to be cleaned at this point in time. It'll be cleaned with gentle wave. Now, they have a couple of different protocols now. They have a reduced time protocol. I would not do that. I would use the full 8-minute system. I want to make sure everything's out of there before it's obturated. That's what Ben Johnson would do right now.
Okay, so you're saying so you answered the gentle wave question. I mean, obviously there's no question that's an amazing cleaner. In fact, when I was lecturing in Israel, I saw another guy demo something very similar with kind of looked like the old micro air abrasion units we had, but it was under high pressure water. And when he gave me the demo, I mean, the hair on my arms stood up. I mean, okay, you answered that, but what about the CBCT? What percent of molars with that endodontist? I mean, is that a standard? You want a 3-dimensional film on every molar done or every tooth done? Is it just for failed endo?
Well, for me, that's every retreatment, every surgery. I would do a CBCT so that I know what I'm facing before I go into it, not preoperatively on just a regular referral, but every retreatment.
And the reason I'm asking, I mean, I obviously know the difference between talking to Ben and Stevie Wonder. I mean, I totally understand that vision is, but when you talk to a lot of oral radiologists, they do not like all these CBCTs, especially on kids getting screened for ortho. They're like, are you out of your mind? Some of these kids have already had, 2 or 3 CBCTs before they get out of high school. And the oral radiologists, they are not liking that. But my gosh, you got to go. I could talk to you for 40 days, 40 nights. Ben, do you think there's anything that I should have asked you when I had the man on? I mean, I got the Big Ben of Endo on, and I'm just hoping I didn't forget any big obvious questions.
No, not. I don't think there's anything that you haven't asked me. I would say one thing, particularly to general practitioners, viewers. It's always been my philosophy is do the best for the patient. So if it looks like it's too long, too curvy, too calcified, too whatever, call your local endodontist. Don't get into it and screw it up.
Because kids, when you come out of school, I love your bright-eyed and bushy-tailed ambition, and you want to learn endo and Invisalign and perio and you want to learn it all, but by God, you can't. There's only so many years. And
you can't. And the goal of dental schools is to turn out graduates who are competent. That's stated in their goals. They are competent to do this, this, or this. Did not say proficient. So you only gain proficiency once you get out of dental school, go to CE courses, hands-on courses, visit. I mean, like you say, I'll offer, come out, see me, come out and spend the day. Watch.
But I got two final questions I want to hurry up on because I don't want to miss out on these questions. Number one, these kids, I mean, they're in the middle of a pandemic. The class of COVID 2020. I mean, we just graduated 6,500 dentists in the middle of a pandemic, and a lot of them are thinking, to put it in perspective, on the classified ads on Dentaltown, we've always had about 1,000 practices for sale and about 5,000 jobs posted for a job. Now there's 2,000 practices for sale and only 1,000 jobs. A lot of the guys over 60, if they'd never lost their money in the stock market or divorce, whatever, they're like, I'm done. So jobs are tough, and a lot of them are sitting there thinking maybe this is a good time to go to specialty school. And there were 8 when I got out of school. Now there are 9. Now there's 12. But endo is the number one demand. I mean, oral surgery, endo are the top 2 specialties that all the DSOs are bringing in. That's the highest demand. And then to a much lesser extent, perio, pediatric dentistry, ortho, prosthodontics, dental anesthesia, oral facial pain, oral medicine, oral path, oral radiology, and dental public health. My question is, what would you say to a dental student who's thinking about wanting to be an endodontist? Do you still think 2020, if she's 25 years old at 2020 to be an endodontist, you think what does the future for her look like in your opinion?
Actually, I think it's very good. I think very good for several reasons. There's always been, if you just take endodontists as a group, why are general practitioners allowed to do endodontics? It's so complicated, I mean, that's a group thought process. Well, number one, if you take the number of root canals done every year and divide by 6,000, which is about how many clinicians we actually have in the U.S., there's no way endodontists could handle the demand. So that's a ridiculous thing. Now there's some concern that things like rotary nickel titanium and or let's say gentle wave, this is going to make endodontics so easy everybody will be doing it. That's never happened. it increases our body of knowledge. So I think the diagnosis, the implementation, the treatment, I think endodontics, this is the best time in the world in history to have a root canal. And so I think the need is going to be there. So if they're thinking about going to graduate school, that's be top of my list. But having said that, Howard, I got to tell you, I've lectured to graduate students for a long time now. And the students that I see now when I go in to talk, maybe it's just because they think I'm full of manure or whatnot, but I don't see the attentiveness there that I saw in the early 90s. In the early 90s, it was like they were sponges wanting to soak up information. Now it's like their bodies who just want to get out of class. I don't see the desire to be excellent. 20, 25% maybe. The other 80% just want to do their time and get out. And that bothers me. And along with your graduating classes, I talked to just this morning to a professor at one of the dental schools, and he said their graduating class is graduating having done endo only in plastic blocks.
I know.
And I think that's
and the price doubled. When Brad Gelman and I were at UMKC in the 80s, we had 6 full-time endodontists for our deal.
Yes.
And now the tuition is 5 times more, and they have 1 endodontist for the whole damn school, and they're charging him $100,000 a year. So of course he wants everybody to do it on a plastic block. I mean, how did they quadruple the price and cut the number of endodontists? And say, but I want to go back to leave your endo to business. You know, when I look at the dental data of sales around the world, it seems like dentistry grows with the growth of the economy. I mean, and economies have been growing 1.5% to 2.5% a year because governments are just completely incompetent. But even within that, the only double-digit growth I see is in clear aligners and implants. And when you look at Dentsply, I mean, like 40% of their sales comes from the 2 channels they sell direct, the Tulsa Dental Endo and the Astrotech Dental Implants. What does that say for the middleman, dental manufacturer? We're talking about Sam Walton. Sam Walton disintermediated the middleman. And to tell you how brutal it was, when these big paper towels and toilet companies and toilet paper companies, they wouldn't sell direct, he said, well, this is the United States of America. There's more than one company that can sell toilet paper and paper towels. In fact, when those guys wanted to get back in his grace, when you drive down to Bentonville, you will see large headquarters of these big Fortune 500 companies who went there and built it because they didn't have a contract, but they figured we missed out on the biggest distributor. And maybe if all of our employees live in Bentonville, Arkansas, going to church and school, whatever, maybe Sam will eventually forgive us. I mean, but what does that say to the middleman of Shine and Patterson and Benco and Burkhardt when Dentsply is selling direct on their Tulsa Dental Endo and their Astrotech Dental Implants? I mean, and none of these big companies, like, they don't sell direct on Amazon. But when you go to those dental schools, every girl in that class has got the Amazon app on her phone. And so what does that say about the future of middleman distributors? Are they here to stay? Or do you think they're going to get disintermediated in the future, or a balance in between? Where's this going?
Well, they're going to be diminished. That's a definite. Number one, I started selling direct because nobody would take the product. And then when I became successful, everybody wanted to take the product. But I tried with a couple of little distributors down in Georgia, but the dental dealers are order takers, and that's all they are. They're order takers. You can't expect a salesman to be proficient in 5,000 products. It's not going to happen. So we started selling direct. You order by 3 o'clock, you get it by 10 o'clock the next morning, pay by credit card. We got our money. Everything is fine. Now it's no longer calls. It's just internet. So it gets shipped out quickly. And you mentioned Shine in there. Well, Shine has got Brasseler. That's a direct sales also. You've got Edge Endo. That's direct. So most of their endodontic stuff are going that way. Existing products, got to purchase paper points. Anybody's got those. And dental dealers have their use, because if you're out, oh my God, let's call Patterson, get it delivered right away. So they're there, but they're not going to be the major source of distribution. And Howard, I got to go.
Oh, okay. Hey, if I know you go to Arizona a lot with Dr. McClammy, but my gosh, after listening to you, I would love to talk to Bajarn Bergheim of CEO of Sun Endo and your endodontist buddy right here in Arizona, Tom McClammy, because you guys have so many great stars. But hey, thank you so much for all that you've done for me personally and for dentistry, from letting me come visit you when I had hair and helping me and everyone. You've done so much. You're the maestro of endodontics. And thank you for being the maestro of endodontics.
Well, I appreciate it. And thank you for having me.